And before we move on to the substantial topic of today's meeting, I want to bring to your attention, as I do at the start of every public session, a note on privilege. Witnesses who are giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts here are protected by absolute privilege in respect to the evidence they give to the committee. This means that a witness has a full defence in any defamation action for anything said at a committee meeting. However, witnesses are expected not to abuse this privilege and may be directed to cease giving evidence on an issue at the Chair's direction. Witnesses should follow the direction of the Chair in this regard and are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that, as is reasonable, no adverse commentary should be made as against an identifiable third person or entity. For witnesses who are giving evidence from a location outside the parliamentary precincts, so those joining us on Microsoft Teams, you are asked to note that you may not benefit from the same level of immunity from legal proceedings as a witness giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts, and you may consider it appropriate to take legal advice on this matter. Privilege against defamation does not apply to the publication by you outside of the proceedings held by the committee of any matter arising from proceedings. And to our members, I'd like to advise you of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate when they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, if you are attempting to participate from outside the precincts, I'll ask you to leave the meeting. And any member partaking via Microsoft Teams, I will ask you that prior to making your contribution that you confirm that you are in fact on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. And members are again reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks, and it's imperative that you comply with any such direction. The agenda for today's meeting is the adapted National Inshore Fishermen's Association proposal for Inshore Fisheries Income Stabilisation and Climate Compensation Scheme. We're joined by representatives of NIFA, by Mr. Michael Desmond, Chairperson, who's joining us online, and Mr. John Minari, Vice Chairperson, who's with us here in the committee room too. The opening statement has been forwarded already to members, but I will allow 5 minutes to go through the opening statement, either Michael or John, or you can give a shorter synopsis of the same. And just to remind both witnesses and members of the clocks around the room here to keep an eye on them, please, so we can get through the business of the meeting. Once the opening statement has been delivered, I'll go to members in order that they indicate here, and there will be 7 minutes for questions and answers to each member, for each member. And to note that that 7 minutes has to include both the questions and indeed the answers. So over to NIFA, Michael or John, I would like to kick off.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair, and I'd like to take the opportunity to once again thank the members of the Joint Oireachtas Committee for giving us the opportunity to state our case once again with regards to this submission. The opening statement is as follows: a deliverable framework for inshore fisheries stabilisation and climate adaptation. This document outlines a structured, practical and policy-aligned approach to addressing the growing economic and environmental challenges facing Ireland's inshore fishing sector. The framework responds to the significant deterioration in sector conditions since the publication of the 2019 to 2023 strategy, highlighting urgent pressures such as rising operational costs, climate-driven loss of fishing days, market instability and resource constraints. It sets out targeted EU-compatible measures designed to stabilise incomes, support coastal communities and align with national climate adaptation objectives. The key elements of the proposal include a multi-annual inshore sustainability and resilience scheme to provide income stability, a weather safety and assurance payment to address climate-related loss of fishing days, and a voluntary public goods and sustainability scheme to support environmental contributions, supporting actions on bait security, diversification and market resilience. The document also outlines a clear implementation pathway, governance structure and a realistic delivery timeline, with a strong emphasis on fiscal responsibility and alignment with existing national and EU policy framework. Ireland's inshore fishermen are primary food producers, operating under uniquely challenging economic and environmental conditions. The sector urgently needs financial support to secure its future. Targeted income stabilisation, climate compensation, and fair access to fisheries resources will ensure the sector remains economically viable, environmentally responsible, and socially essential to Ireland's rural coastal communities. Without these supports, the sector will continue to deteriorate with a detrimental, irreversible impact on rural coastal communities. And given the scale and urgency of the challenges outlined, we would greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss this proposal further and explore how these measures can be progressed in a timely manner.
Senator Boyle.
And thanks, John, for coming on, and Michael for being on. I would be very supportive of this document, to be honest. I think it's something that needs to be done for the inshore fishermen. It really does. I mean, you are the backbone of the small communities in rural Ireland, like in Donegal and all over Ireland. So just on, can we maybe ascertain, many days in a year would you lose due to bad weather? You know, I know every year is different. I know this year has been particularly hard in the January, February. Would you have a rough idea how many days the inshore men would be losing on this area and them local months and early months of the year?
Well, we'd estimate 100 days, Deputy, but this past year, as you know, in my lifetime fishing, I've never seen anything like it anyway. I mean, we're in the second week of June now. I haven't been out in the last 8 days due to bad weather. There's been 3 days of gale force winds in the past 7 days. This morning, now it's force 6. And in our document there, you will see that in the first 100 days of this year, there was 90 days of a swell over 2 metres. Now, 2 metres is the minimum, but sometimes that swell could have been 5 or 6 metres. For us, I suppose the weather broke the last week of August last year, and we got 2 storms in the first 2 weeks of September. And since then, it's just a day here and a day there. I've never experienced anything like this past year anyway.
No, and in fairness, Michael, I'd be hearing from the fishermen of Donegal that they've been the exact same, potmen and everything, that they just can't go out. The weather's that bad. But you did touch on a weather insurance. How would that work, or would it be for so many days in the year? Could you say maybe for 100 days, or how would it work? You know, the weather seems to be getting worse all the time, Michael. If you sit on 100 days and you're doing 150, how would this weather insurance work?
Well, the way we base this, Senator, is on you could take the information from Met Éireann about the amount of days that it was over a certain swell height, and then on average we would work 10-hour days, the smaller boats, and we think we're being very reasonable just putting in for €14.10, which is the minimum wage, multiplied by 10 hours per day by the amount of days we're off, and it's definitely at a minimum 100 days per year now. So we put in the minimum in the document, and that is what we're basing our figures on, and that is coming from swell height from Met Éireann statistics.
Right, and just on swell height, Michael, would 2 metres be a cut-off for your people going out? You know, like I've been told there's parts of beside me, Doon, that you wouldn't go out on at all if it was bad, you know, because of the swell out there. There's places where swell really comes under a factor here, you know.
Yeah, 2 metres would be kind of the cut-off, but like when 2 metres is forecast, it's always over it, you know, it's always over it. But for small open boats, like you're not going to get out and over 2 metres. Maybe some of the bigger inshore boats would, but when we said that there was 90 days of the swell over 2 metres, there was probably 80 of those days it was over 3 metres.
Right.
You know, and 70 days was over 4 metres. We just put in the minimum.
Right. And just one final question on operational costs. We all know that the costs of running a boat, and no matter how small or how big it has gone up, how can we try and put money back into the fisherman's pocket? I know there's a fuel scheme there, but as the inshore fishermen, are they drawing down this fuel scheme, or is it very hard? You know, it's good to hear from yourselves.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, for the likes of me, I just get a flat rate of €350, no more, no less, because that's the way the scheme was introduced for a boat of my size. So that's what I'm getting for 100 days for the rise in the fuel. But maybe John would have a better idea there, because he had to go through the rigmarole of the actual fuel scheme.
It'd be good to hear from John now about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Deputy. Yeah, I've went through it there over the weekend, and to say it was difficult would be an understatement. I just actually met with Minister Dooley there before I came in here to discuss to try and do something about it. We have an online system that BAM spent a lot of European money on developing, and they named it Smart Simple. And I think it's a good old Irish sarcasm, because it's neither smart nor simple. Anybody I've talked to, from my accountant to agricultural advisors, etc., say there's nothing they've seen like it for difficulty. Even for myself, that is fairly apt at computers, it's very difficult. I was putting in details that, as per I was told, they were coming up red, not letting me do it. I had to contact my inshore officer 3 times, and they had to contact then the help desk at BAM to try and get it through. We eventually got it through, but even so far as when you clicked on the button, click here for help, the message came up, this is not available, please contact the website owner. So for guys that aren't adapted computers, we've seen with the last support schemes where 900 people applied out of a possible fleet of 1,700. So to say that there's 800 vessels on the register that cost a lot of money to keep your boat up to a standard that you're licensed, just didn't want to apply for these schemes, I don't think is right. I think it's that we've highlighted from the start the problems people have with online, etc., and the difficulties. We have the situation with agriculture where you can get paper forms, even self-declarations for revenue, etc., but no, you have to upload every invoice, you have to upload the corresponding bank details for that invoice to show it's paid, and you think, great, we have all that done. Then you have to go on to the next page where you have to put in your invoice number, the amount of fuel on the invoice, the price per litre of the invoice, and then the corresponding file document to show that that invoice was paid. So I don't understand when you give them the invoice that you have to input the details again.
I do think it's something this committee should put a bit of pressure on the Minister.
To be fair to the Minister, he's agreed to try and hold a meeting between ourselves and BAM tomorrow to rectify it, but I don't think one day is going to fix
reports
that.
Like from all...
We've been talking about this for years. Through the previous CEO of BAM, we raised it several times, and it seems every time you raise an issue, it's like the old saying, and you say will be used against it. They seem to go further and further down the road. We've asked for paper versions to be used, and the CEO of BAM said going back to paper would be a backward step, but if you haven't completed the last step correctly and move on.
Look, it's perhaps something that we as a committee can discuss and maybe write both to BIM and to the Minister to raise the concerns.
Yeah, because this isn't just with the fuel, this is ongoing.
I think, Chair, it's a matter of urgency, you know, because I can tell you I've at least 15 to 20 people applying, and no more than John. It's just near impossible.
So we'll action that. We'll write to both the Minister and to BIM to raise a concern. I'll move on to Deputy Ward. 7 minutes, Deputy.
So, John, do you think, we're talking about this smart, simple moving forward, do you think that it was, on all your years dealing with this, it's been designed to fail? This is constantly happening at this?
Well, anybody I've met has had trouble with it, so we've raised it with BAM before, with the previous.
And how long back would you have been raising this with them?
We're going back 3 or 4. This is the new.
Yeah.
This is the second generation. When we were complaining about the last system, we're on to the new system.
And they updated it. And
it's worse.
And it's worse. Okay. Right. Okay, I'll move on. Are there any differences between the proposals and the previous ones you presented to the committee? And if so, what are they?
I'll let Michael answer that one. Maybe he.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. There is a few differences, definitely, yeah. But on the first question there that you asked to John about the difficulty of the system, I'd just like to point out something, that if you apply for a grant, like an SCI grant, to improve the BER rating of your home, or get one of those geothermal heat pumps or something like that, you can go through it in seconds. Mm-hmm. But whereas if it's something they want you to do, they can make the grant application very easy. If it's something they don't want you to do, the grant application becomes extremely difficult and people give up. But on your second question, Deputy, there are a few differences in it, all right. We got information back from the department regarding our first document that it just wouldn't fly, basically, that the wording of it, we had to go down more the sustainability route going forward and more towards the climate adaptation route. And they basically said because of the cap, the basic income support that farmers are getting is going to be cut over the coming years, so they're not going to start another industry on that. So therefore, we changed it to suit what we think the upcoming EU policy will be. And we ran it through the EU Commission as well there the other day. Myself and John were over with Commissioner Costas and explained our situation to him. Which regarding state aid rules, and that Minister Dooley is saying, and our other state officials, that because of state aid rules, that it can't be implemented an actual financial support package for Inshore. But Deputy Costas assured us it could be in exceptional circumstances once he gets it in writing from the department. So basically taking everything into account, and we got feedback from previous civil servants as well, we came up with this document. There's not a whole lot of difference. The difference is in the wording to suit the EU and government policy on climate adaptation, I suppose, is the answer in short, Deputy.
Okay, I'll move on. Tomorrow we're going to consider supplementary estimates proposed in relation to the fuel support scheme. Is there anything you think this committee should take into the consideration before doing so? What your opinions, please?
I think one of the issues could be the flat rate for under 6 metre vessels. I don't think it's very fair that just based on size we've had the issue, we've been discriminated against previously for other issues due to size, and I don't think it's fair that a vessel should be just given a flat rate just based on size. Like if you burn more fuel, you should be allowed to. So, and it's definitely for when you come to the smaller vessels, I don't know if will it be possible or not. But when you compare the cost of fuel for a large vessel buying it by the tonne compared to smaller operators that have to go to the petrol pumps to buy it, where at one stage green diesel was nearly the same price as white diesel at some petrol pumps in the last while, like it's totally, the difference between buying it by the tonne and buying it at the pump could be another 30-40 cents at times. So the smaller vessels are definitely being impacted more severely.
Yeah, so you've got the opportunity when you're there, if you can buy it, let's say you can buy it off the harbour master or something, you've got a bulk buy situation.
Well, if you ring the diesel company and say, I want a lorry load, 30,000 litres, you will get it a lot cheaper Dunjomanary, I want
Then going up to
leaders.
going up the road, yeah. Okay. Michael?
Yeah, just the exact same as that. The last 3 or 4 schemes that Minister McConnell came up with from Inshore, it was different for over 8 metre boats to under 8 metre boats. I fell under the under 8 metre category, and I'm a full-time fisherman, but a part-time fisherman alongside me with an 8.2 metre boat got more than me, even though he had. He was only at it 2 months of the year. I'm at it 12 months of the year, and I'm a full-time fisherman, and I get less because of the size of my boat. You know, our value to coastal communities should not be decided by the length of our vessel when an awful lot of us are full-time in the smaller vessels. That's something that has to be looked into, because I suppose it's discrimination, really.
Okay. So Michael, you believe then that it should be on, as you were saying, your friend is doing it for 2 months of the year and you're doing it for a full year. So every application, there should be detail within that should be considered moving forward?
Well, definitely for the size of the vessel. If you're an inshore fisherman, you're an inshore fisherman.
Yeah.
We should all be entitled to the same thing. Like, I understand that there are full-time inshore fishermen that have had to get part-time jobs, you know, but for that, if you're referring to the criteria we put down there in this submission, where we said people with full-time jobs, what we're saying there is we were told that we would lose credibility as well by looking for the same pay. Like, if we were looking for a bad weather payment for some fellow who has a fishing license but he's not fishing in the winter anyway, that wouldn't make any sense, you know. So for, you know, the bad weather payment, it would have to be based on people who are affected, regardless of the size of the boat. It is the fishermen that rely on fishing for the winter, you know, that are dependent on fishing for a living, that get the payment.
Thank you both. Deputy McLaughlin.
Yeah, thanks very much. And just to commend the National Inshore Fishermen Association on the second document they would have spoke before the committee previously. Whenever I started off as a spokesperson, I'm from the Inishowen Peninsula, so obviously inshore fishermen all around me, known them all my life. But I took on the role of spokesperson for my party about 6 years ago, roughly. And I remember when I first started touring the piers and harbours, I just was curious as to whether inshore fishermen wanted a financial subsidy. And back then, they just repeatedly told me wherever I went that we just want to fish, we want fish, you know. So for the NIFA to come forward with this proposal, that's a clear signal of how serious things have got. And there's now undoubtedly a crisis where financial stabilisation is needed. And you see, well, there's always obviously been financial subsidies for farmers under the Common Agriculture Policy. It's been there for a long time. And if you look at artists, there's an acceptance by the state that artists perform a really valuable role on behalf of our people, but unfortunately it's very hard to make a living. So that's the reason why the basic income scheme, really welcome scheme, has been introduced and extended. And it was Michael Desmond who first drew the comparison in this committee, actually, with the basic income for our artist scheme, and he planted that in my own head, and I think he was absolutely right to do so. So I think it's really important that our committee support this, the principle of a scheme, whatever about the details that can be ironed out, but the principle of a stabilisation and climate adaptation. And I also want to say that, and I'll get to a question in a second, but I did want to put all that on the record. There's sort of three aspects to this, and the final aspect deals with working with other stakeholders in terms of our marine environment and protecting it. So there's a lot of there's the financial stabilisation, there's the accepting the reality that climate is having a big impact, and we don't want fishermen to go out and be forced to fish in dangerous conditions. And then the issue of working in partnership with other stakeholders and having a bit of financial support to do that. And there's plenty of examples in the farming community of that being rewarded. And there's lots of financial support schemes for farmers, and rightly so, that are there. So I think it's really important we come in behind the principle that's here. So there's a couple of questions I have is for maybe John and Michael. Is obviously you're dealing with Michael Berkery right now, and he's supposed to be looking at financial supports for the seafood industry as a whole. Just to give us a sense of where that's at right now, as you understand it. And obviously you've put this proposition on the table. How does that fit into that? And then secondly, I've looked at, and my office has looked at this issue of, because we have engaged, I had an engagement with Minister Timmy Dooley in the Dáil recently on this, and in his first contribution to me, he talked about state aid and how state aid prevents any of this from happening. But then I sort of engaged a bit further with him. And looking at this from a European perspective, there is options when there's a crisis for our government to ask for dispensation in terms of state aid, and we see it in terms of the war and invasion of Ukraine. We see it in terms of the Middle East and the increase in prices. You can get agreement from the European Commission to break away from established state aid when there's a crisis. So I do think if the government wants to make this happen, they can do it, but it would mean negotiation with the European Commission. So where's it at in terms of what's your understanding, folks, in terms of Michael Berkery? What's your understanding in terms of state aid? What are you being told to guide our committee and how we should deal with this?
Yeah, I'll come in there first, and I'll leave John give his ideas on it as well. Thanks very much for the questions, Deputy. I suppose there were sort of three parts to your question there. The first one, where you said about us now asking for financial support. We wouldn't be asking for it unless we needed it. We would prefer to be self-sufficient and to be making our living from fishing all year round, but it's just not possible anymore. But in this document, we're not asking for it full time. It's over the next 3 years, and then to relook at it again because of what has happened regarding Brexit, the war in Ukraine, market collapse, now the price of fuel going through the roof. And on top of that, we know what's coming down the line to us with, aquaculture, as in salmon farming, renewables, and closed areas. And should fishermen that have been in the fishing industry for several generations, over hundreds of years, be put out of business because of these policies? We don't think so. And unless this document is actually going to be implemented, there's not going to be a future for us. As for the Berkery report or the task force, the honest answer is we don't know. We've had, since the opening of the task force, we've had 2 meetings. We've been kind of told that the task force is dead in the water unless the Mulvey report is going to be published. We know that the Mulvey report has been seen by the Department, BIM and our Minister months ago. But like the mackerel report that was supposed to be issued 2.5 years ago, it seems to have disappeared completely, and one can't continue without the other. The 2 meetings we had with the task force, while they were good meetings, I suppose you would say, but they were concentrated on one particular thing. Like the last one was a 2-hour meeting and it was just about tax. And yet we were told, put our submission into the task force. But like we said from the very beginning, this submission has to be implemented by government. I mean, as far as I know, the final report from the task force is going to be due out the end of June, but yet there's only been 2 meetings of it. So how is that possible? And sorry, I'm after forgetting what was your last question, Deputy?
No, the state aid, the issue of state aid.
Oh yeah, the state aid roads. There is a huge discrepancy in what we are telling Minister Costas and European MEPs from Ireland and in what government officials are telling them with regard to the state of Inshore and whether we need help or not. There is absolutely no reason why state aid rules won't be relaxed in exceptional circumstances, and all they need is it in writing from our officials saying that Inshore are in trouble and then state aid rules can be relaxed for us. But for some reason, that's not happening, so you can make your own conclusions from that.
Thank you both. Deputy Whitmore.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work on this. A lot of work has gone into this proposal, and I think, as my colleagues have said, I think the principle of payments for Inshore Fisheries is really important. I think that, and I've said this many times before, but just from a cultural perspective, I think it's really important that there is a support and maintenance of this sector, and indeed for local and rural and coastal communities, it's really important. So I think this work is really, really useful, and I think it's absolutely where we need to be going on it. I've just listened to the discussion in relation to the state aid aspects, and I think probably that will be the biggest challenge to get something like this across the line. But I think that there are ways to, I suppose, frame it in a way where it's state aid principles or barriers aren't as applicable. So I think, and I just wondering if you considered, because I know you have sort of a flat rate of the 20,000 per year of the stabilisation fund. Did you consider tying that in more with marine protection and fisheries protection areas? Because I think it will be a much easier thing for a government to justify that actually that the inshore sector are working to protect the marine as well. I think it would be an easier ask, whether it's from the minister seeking approval of funding for this from the EU. So I'm just wondering, did you consider tying the two elements, so the first element and I think the third element where you talk about the environmental management, did you consider tying those two elements in together so that it is seen more as an environmental and stabilisation fund?
No, not really, I suppose, is the answer to your question, Deputy. We looked on them as two separate issues, that, a separate payment for voluntary environmental issues and then just a sustainability payment to keep us there, to keep tourism coming to small coastal areas, because that's what an awful lot of Irish tourism is based on in these fishing ports around the places they come to see us and that. But there probably is ways of doing it. We are 3 or 4 years now trying to do our own protected areas with regard to bringing in pot numbers, that each vessel is only allowed to use a certain amount of number of pots for various fisheries. But, the brown crab working group has met 3 times in a row, or 3 times over the last 3 years, and we're told by the SFPA that it would be impossible to police anything like those types of measures that we have been asking for. So therefore, we didn't tie them in together. But we've come up with other ideas and have contacted local or coastal TDs, coastal senators, the previous CEO of BIM, like with regard to plastic collection. And there's a group there called SIMI, the Society of the Irish Mortar Industry. And as you know, the mortar industry is getting a bad rap from environmentalists. And then fishermen, to an extent, are being blamed for plastic in the ocean, even though it's 98% of plastic comes from the rivers. And I think the fishing industry, along with the shipping industry, is responsible for 0.05%. But what we were going to do was get our members to, we're collecting plastic every day anyway and taking them to our local recycling centres. but we were thinking that if we teamed up with the mortar industry, whereas that for every, say, 200 kilos or 300 kilos of plastic a vessel collects, that for each new car then that is sold in Ireland, that we would get 50 euros, like our organisation, and we've become a cooperative now, so we can pay a dividend if we ever get into profit, and then pay the fishermen for cleaning up the ocean. But I get the usual reply from every TD, leave it with me, and the same with the CEO of BIM, leave it with me. And we're trying, Deputy, but we're just not getting anywhere.
Yeah. John, do you want to?
Yeah, I suppose just on the MPA's issue, we're only at a stage yet where we're discussing what may or may not need protection, and if you align yourself to that, there's always the danger then, because of the low impact of the inshore fisheries, and they say, well, we're not an effect on what needs to be protected, then why would we need payment to do something that we're not having an effect on? There's that end of it. And there's also the issue that we have the likes of Fair Seas, who had an event in Cork recently where it seems that they are leading the charge with this. It's the government that is doing this. So we have the government that has the money. We've seen Minister Dooley give 16 million for trees in Clare lately. So I don't think it's right to say that the state aid rules are an issue. They're only an issue when they don't want to pay out, no more than the BAM online portal. If you don't want to do something, it's easy to find excuses, but if the will is there, these things can be done. We've met with Commissioner Costas, and he has said it's possible. Okay. We've had a Department of the Marine official, when we said this to them at the task force, who turned around and says, Commissioner Costas doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay. Okay. So
I must say, from the two of you, I can hear the frustration in your voice, because it's like you're just constantly pushing and offering solutions, and nothing seems to be being taken up.
If I could use this time, just that we have our document, but to understand how we got here, because if you neglect something when you need to repair, it's going to cost an awful lot more than if you keep up on maintenance. We go back to 2018 when the inshore sector, the task force, or the inshore sector had what? I can't think of the actual. Was
it the report?
The inshore strategy from 2019 to 2023. It said in that the inshore sector would have a prosperous and sustainable future delivered through a united industry and a strong, influential voice. That strategy identified the issues in 2018, offered solutions that were never delivered upon. It was given to BAM to implement. BAM failed us. That was 2018. In 2020, we had COVID, where we were offered €500 a month to surrender our licences, €500 to give up your fishing business. That's the support the inshore sector got, was offered. We had Brexit. 2022, we had the Ukraine war, where Minister McConnell, when we asked for fuel supports then, said instead of fuel supports, he was given an extra month's tie-up scheme for the larger vessels that he said himself was worth 12 million. They went to the larger vessels. The inshore sector couldn't couldn't access. Now we have the Iran war, where we're starting to see some help, but we've been neglected for so long now. What's the cost of putting things right is going to be so much more. And it's not our fault that we've been neglected. We've been asking for help. We've offered solutions, but we've been totally ignored going along. So,
okay. All right. Thank you for that, because I know it is incredibly difficult. In relation to... Oh, okay, correct.
Yeah, look, and I too would like to welcome our guests today from the National Inshore Fisheries Association, both John and Michael. Look, I strongly support the proposal for an inshore fisheries income stabilisation and climate compensation scheme. Fishing communities, including fishermen and fisherwomen, are on their knees right around the Irish coastline. and it's time for action, I suppose, putting it in a nutshell, before it's too late. There are huge issues and challenges to the sector, including quota cuts, as we've spoken about many times in here, fuel costs, increasing operational costs, and the lost fishing days due to extreme weather conditions. And also it's referenced about the imported shellfish from South America and Asia. The committee has also called on Minister Dooley for enhanced representation there on of the inshore sector on the food, fish and seafood sector group, and I'd like to support that call. I think, you know, the seafood sector is critical to Ireland in the context of the food supply chain, and the importance of the supply by Irish fishermen and fisherwomen in the context of in that context cannot be, I suppose, strongly emphasised enough. I have supported and I am supporting the submission to the Minister calling for the dedicated fuel support scheme. It's absolutely critical. Like we all know about the increased costs in fuel, etc. And I welcome the government's response in the context of providing up to 15 million to vessel owners. That's hugely important to the survival going forward. The payment of 20,000 per each eligible vessel to be paid over a 3-year period, that has to be considered favourably, Chair. In regards to the call there for the weather and safety assurance payments compensating for no fish days caused by extreme weather, I too would, like my colleagues, would strongly support that. Employees, I suppose, if one generalises, receive paid days in the context of bad weather conditions when roads are impassable or power outages, etc., and it should be no different for the fishing sector. Can I ask, and I'm going to ask a question that we all know the answer to, but I just want him to outline, and the question is, if the proper and adequate supports are not put in place, can he outline the reality and what it means for the industry going forward? Obviously, I believe there'll be no industry if we don't deliver on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that. All right. If we don't get these supports, our sector will continue to deteriorate. It'll have a detrimental, irreversible impact on our rural coastal communities, because that's all that's really in the most peripheral rural areas of Ireland. It's small fishermen and small farmers. And you know yourself the amount of small farmers that have disappeared over the last 20 years. And from my experience of inshore fishermen, in the last 2 decades, they were leaving yearly, then monthly, then weekly. But this year, it's actually been daily. The weather has been that bad. And when Minister Dooley said the other day, when he was asked the question by Deputy McLaughlin about this submission, he said that we have job seekers allowance, fish assist, our opportunities lie in coastal tourism and wind farms. Now on wind farms, I, along with 90% of the fishermen I know, would never work for those global conglomerates who are going to pour tens of thousands of tons of concrete onto the seabed. How can we, if we can't go out fishing, how can we go out doing marine tourism? Like, the weather is that bad now. Marine tourism is only for a couple of weeks of the year, and that is if you get a good summer. And the fish assist, we have 2 members who applied for fish assist that I know of in West Cork in the last year. One got a bad burning and the other fella got a hip replacement. They both have young kids. One was offered €3.60 and the other was offered €1.80. Now, and the other thing then, job seekers allowance. To qualify for job seekers allowance, you have to be actively seeking alternative employment. We are not. We want to stay fishing, and that is why we've put this submission together, and these areas I'm talking about will become absolute ghost towns unless it's implemented. John?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. I suppose for every job at sea, in our document we're talking about at least seven jobs ashore. We were questioned on this number by people in BAM. We asked them, well, if you have a problem with our figures, what is the actual figures? They couldn't give us actual figures. If you look at the UK, the southwest of England, our closest neighbour, there for every job at sea, there's 15 ashore. So every small boat with 2 or 3 people on board, that's 20 jobs ashore. So you lose a half a dozen of small boats in an area, that's a massive, that's like closing a factory. But it's because we're so small at a grassroots level, it's not seen. You could disappear. You can drive in Sligo past Mullaghmore, Milk Harbour, Rothley, Ross's Point, all these harbours, you never see them. But there's employment, there's activity, there's the onshore employment. It'll get to a tipping point, where if we lose too many people from the inshore sector, the onshore services will lose. You see the likes of what Swan Country have laid off in the last while in the fishing industry because there's not enough activity in the larger vessels to sustain them. If you get to a tipping point where you lose the inshore sector, the offshore sector then is going to lose the guys that start off in the inshore. Like my own son there, start off in a small boat. You hope to work to a bigger boat on the deck. They're struggling with crewing problems. The whole industry will collapse if you lose the inshore sector. It's the largest sector of the industry. But you'll have this case where we'll disappear. So-called seafood will be imported. BAM will report on the seafood industry. Millions will be coming into the country in value. What's wrong? The seafood industry is growing. So.
Please, Scanlon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, John and Michael, for their presentations here today. There must be something radically wrong where you have a fisherman with the boat less than 8 metres fishing full-time, and somebody with an 8.2 metre boat only fishing for 2 months of the year can benefit more from the system than the person that's fishing all year round. I think there's something radically wrong there, quite honestly. I'd also like to think, I understand that the application for compensation is very, very difficult and people are finding it extremely hard to try and get compensation. I believe BIM are the people responsible for administering the scheme, and I think, you know, maybe we should invite them into a meeting here to try and streamline and you know, let them know just how people are suffering out there, trying to survive, not able to survive. And as has been said already, the inshore fishermen are going to be a thing of the past if something isn't done. And I think that if BIM are the people responsible for administering this scheme, they're the people that we should bring in here and discuss the problems with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy. Would either Michael or John wish to respond to that point?
Yeah, I'd just like to come in there. Something has to be on the 8 point. First of all, when the Deputy there says assistance, those particular schemes, like there was only 3 times, but in fairness to Minister McConnell, it was a pittance, but he did come up with 3 different schemes for us. They were very low, but they were just to get us through, you know, when things were extra bad. But this whole fuel scheme, you know, and they're looking upon it like it's helping us. all it is giving us back a fraction of the increase in the fuel. You know, it's not offsetting it or anything. Like, our fuel is still way dearer. But before we entered the fuel crisis, we were in huge trouble anyway. And then this added to it. But like, we're going to way past fuel supports. Like, fine, it's called the fuel support, but it's not covering the increase. It's just covering a percentage of that increase. And I'm sorry, like, but it's just not enough. We're gone before the fuel ever increased. We issued our first submission how we needed help. You know, we're gone past fuel subsidies long ago. To save Inshore, what's in our document needs to be implemented, but not just from a financial aspect. There's also the aspect of reopening the closed fisheries. Like, there was never before more bass in Irish waters, and they're eating the baby salmon, the smalls, as they come down the river. We have bluefin tuna that we're not allowed to catch, and seals that are protected that are eating the large salmon. Tens of thousands of them, both bluefin that we can't catch and bass that we can't catch and seals that are protected. Like, all these things, these fisheries need to be reopened to help us, and then we wouldn't need financial supports. They were unjustifiably closed on us in the first place. There was, you know, the EU never told them to do it, and the lads at the eel fisheries and the estuaries, they got closed down, and all the EU asked them to do was to regulate it, and Ireland's method of regulation was to ban it. So the lads that were then at those fisheries came down and into the pot fisheries and put more pressure on the shellfish stocks, whereas before, anglers, lobbyists, environmental groups got involved, we were completely sustainable. We fished everything seasonally, and there was plenty stocks there. Like, even if you look back at the 70s and 80s, there was thousands of boats, thousands of more fishermen, and way more fish. But it was as the fisheries were taken off us, and then there was too much concentration going on particular fisheries, that everything went to hell. John, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, just on your point about why do BAM draw a line, that's for their own ease of doing things, because they don't know the fact. They have the figures, but they haven't released them. I asked at a recent NIFA meeting, we done economic surveys this last 3 years, and we want the information from them to help. You need the information on the industry so you can come up with documents and such like. And I asked where we were, and I was told they're hoping to have the 2023 information out shortly. So we're sitting now halfway through 2026, hoping to get the 2023 information. Like, BAM's not, when it comes to the catching sector, BAM isn't fit for purpose. When BAM changed from this, it was introduced to develop the fishing industry, and at some point it changed into the seafood industry. And when they talk about seafood, you're talking about stuff that the only time it's seen the sea was flying when it was crossing the Irish Sea before it landed in Dublin Airport. We're competing against stuff that's called seafood that has never been in the sea. And just because you put a salmon smolt into a cage in salt water and feed it like a sheep or a cow for 12 or 18 months, should that be called seafood? Like, you see with the farmers and what they have to do to get organic status. I think it's time that somebody came up with a way of distinguishing between seafood and what is grown in the sea, or even close to the sea, because we have a situation now where there's salmon on sale in Ireland that is totally farmed on land. So we have that side of things as well to contend with.
Thank you both. I'd like to say a few words at this juncture before we go to the second round of questions and answers. And many of the questions that I'd put that I had to put have been put and have been well answered as well. But just for my own part, I want to thank NIFA for the work that you've put into your initial proposal and the second proposal. I think it's clear the level of need that exists in the inshore sector for for assistance. I think it should be clear to anybody observing the proceedings of this committee the store that we put on the inshore sector. I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't recognise the huge contribution that the inshore sector makes to our coastal communities, to our maritime economy, to our economy overall, to keeping employment in marginal and peripheral communities around our coastline. And for government to have allowed the decline that has already occurred borders on the criminal, I would say it's certainly a very extreme form of neglect that has taken place, and to allow what remains of our inshore sector to come under such pressure at this point is frankly unconscionable. I think that needs to be said, and I think that needs to be heard. I fully support the concept of a scheme that would keep the industry alive in these really difficult times that you're experiencing at the moment. I note the comments that you've made with regards to the existing fuel scheme, and this was criticism that I and others had made at the time that that was being broached here and indeed enacted in these houses, that there would be issues with accessibility, that it wasn't fit for purpose, and I think that urgently needs to be looked for. So this committee, with the agreement of the members here, will write to both BIM and to the Minister to flag those concerns that have been outlined here today. And finally, I just want to make a comment more broadly with regards to the maritime and sea fisheries space. And I think this warrants being raised at this forum. The Taoiseach in the last number of days made a comment at a conference in Cork saying that there ought to be a full senior minister, cabinet-ranked minister for the marine and sea fisheries. And I utterly agree. It's not often that I agree with the Taoiseach, but I have to say I felt it to be deeply, deeply disingenuous for the head of government to effectively flail his arms about and say, well, somebody somewhere should do something. And I just think that needs to be put on the record. And I think it would be welcome if the Taoiseach were minded to engage with this committee at some point in the future to discuss both his proposal, whether it was made flippantly and in the heat of the moment, or whether it is something that he is actually genuinely considering. But it would be worthwhile for him to come before this committee to engage with us on that proposal, and to outline perhaps the reasons why in his last number of occasions where he could have appointed a senior minister in that role, he didn't do it, he chose not to. But I just think that needs to be said, and I'll leave it at that. We'll go to the second round of questions and answers, and I'll invite Deputy McLaughlin, Deputy Whitmore and Senator Boyle in that order. We'll go for 5 minutes in this case, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So the Bordis Gawara portal, what's going on with it? If you could just give us some feedback. I'm hearing feedback that it's really cumbersome and bureaucratic. I think they've spent a lot of money on these systems in recent years. And I'm mindful, that some of the people who need the support will be older. They mightn't be just as tech savvy as a young person. So I just want to get a sense of what are you hearing from your members about this, because obviously we're dealing with financial supports for fishermen, that there's one available. So just get a sense of that. And then before you respond to that, I think it would be in order to, at this point, because there's been great support from the committee members, that we would write to the Minister, Timmy Dooley, conveying, if it's agreeable now with the members, conveying that we've had the hearing today and that there's broad support for the principles that are put forward, and just asking for his response to that. And then secondly, it's been stated here that and this is quite a serious issue, that the Berkery project which is recommending financial supports, Michael Berkery, so that can't conclude without the publication of the Mulvey report, the Kieran Mulvey report. So I think we need to also ask the Minister for an update on that. He had indicated it would be in the weeks ahead, but we're now into obviously June. We're approaching recess in 6 weeks' time. So But the issue for me though is that you know, we need this Mulvey report published so that Michael Berkery can make his recommendations and get urgent support to fishermen, and then we also need his response to this. So if that was agreeable with the members, I would ask that we would do
Are
that.
the two proposals that Deputy McLaughlin has made there, are they agreeable to members? Yeah. Agreed?
So then all it leaves in is the Board Ishkawara, this portal. I just want to get us feedback from NIFA, like what are your members telling you about it?
I think
Okay,
I'll go there. From Avril is our secretary. She's just, that's all she's working on at the minute. From my own personal experience, it took me over 3 hours to upload 13 invoices on it. It's something we've highlighted, as I said before. I met with the Minister before I came down here. He's promised to try and organise a meeting between ourselves and BAM tomorrow to try and sort out the fuel side of things. But it's an ongoing thing. Everything now going forward will be done through the portal. So we've told BAM the issues. We have, at one stage, we had over 40 members, over 10% of our organisation that had no access to emails. So you have a situation where we have members coming now. She has to go to the very start. She has to set up an email for them because she can't do it without an email. You can't register without an email. Then she has to get all their information downloaded, printed, etc., etc. It's putting massive workload on her, but then it's getting uploaded on the BAM portal, so it's fine. They'll only see what's done. As I said before, with the people that didn't apply for whatever reason, they just, BAM says, oh, well, they're just inactive. Why wouldn't they have applied? We had a situation with the last support scheme where to progress through the portal, you had a choice of, do you have access to laptop, personal computer or smartphone? And you could not go on to the next page without clicking one of those. So we had a lot of members that were going to sons, daughters, family members, and they had to click that for them. So BAM says, well, everybody that applied had access to it, so what's the problem? BAM was supposed to help the industry. The CEO's comments that we heard back through the Minister that going back to paper was a backward step. If that's what's needed to help people, then that's what has to be done. Yeah. And on the Seafood Division Task Force, my real fear I have is the Chairman always talk, let's talk about the doables. What can be done? If we have senior department people saying it can't be done, then he's sitting there looking at our document and we're talking about all these things. But then at the end of the report saying, well, we looked at yours, it wasn't doable, thanks very much, move on. And just to highlight a report that I just got from the Fishing News, a UK publication, was published on the 7th of this month, or 7th of last month, sorry. There's a report from the European Market Observatory for Fisheries and Aquaculture Products, and I quote, a return to the pre-2020 conditions is unlikely. Instead, the sector is moving into a new normal where resilience, sustainability and diversification are no longer just responses to crises, but key factors for long-term competitiveness and supply security. So that's a report at EU level talking about a lot of the issues we've raised in our document. So you would be very hopeful that if our Minister goes to Europe with the ask in our document, if they've recognised it, the issues at EU level, I don't see why there can't be funding got, but the ask needs to be made, because it's okay to say we can't have a situation where our Minister says, oh, it's not going to happen, there's no point. Ask and get a reply.
There's an urgency. The deadline is this Friday, the 12th of June, for the scheme. I've just got a message here from somebody who's listening in, and said fully tax compliant, have an accountant, but they pay for the fuel by cash locally, and because they can't show that they've paid for it through a card, that they're not going to be eligible for the scheme. So that's just one wee story. And I'm just concerned about maybe inshore fishermen and women and families that aren't members of NIFA, that haven't got that administrative support, this brilliant support you're giving them. but a huge amount of work. Like, what are they going to do? So maybe it's in order for us to call for this scheme to be extended to try and address these issues urgently.
I was going to make two suggestions. One,
Yeah, if I could come in there, Deputy, I agree with you. We've asked for an extension. My understanding is it is going to be given. With regard to the actual portal, I wouldn't regard myself as being overly stupid, but I'm incapable of using it, and I have to get Avril to do everything for me. And if you look at the amount of inshore boats that are on the fleet register and the amount of inshore boats that apply for grants, it's roughly 50% or less than 50% actually go for them. So I think that tells its own story, really. But I would just like to add, when you said about the Berkeley report and the Mulvey report, and that, could you please also ask for the mackerel report that was commissioned by Minister Charlie McConalogue 3 years ago, that BIM paid for 2.5 years ago, to be published as well, please, where we know the findings are that 400 tonne is not sufficient for inshore, but for some reason it's being finalised for 2.5 years.
Thank you, Michael. Just on Deputy McLaughlin's suggestions there, in response, I would say if it's agreed by the committee that we would make that call on foot of all the evidence that we've heard today about that scheme, that it would be extended, that the deadline would be extended from Friday, and also to note there will be a private meeting of the Select Committee to review estimates with Minister Dooley tomorrow evening, and I'd be prepared to make some time in that meeting for us to raise these points again directly with the Minister, and I'm sure he'd be willing, on foot of his engagements with NIFA this morning and on foot of our correspondence, to engage with us. So I think those two things might allow us some space to do it. Oh, I'm sorry, that select meeting will actually be in public and it'll be broadcast, so some members will be able to see that.
Could I just give one point of information that might be of help? Because when the scheme opened first, one of the criteria was you had to have purchased your fuel from an Irish supplier, and subsequently that's been changed for the benefit of the larger vessels who may have bought their fuel outside of the country for whatever reason. So
Okay.
He has changed things for others, so I don't see why he can't do it for those that need it most.
No, that's an important point. Thank you. John, Deputy Whitmore.
Is it agreed to extend our request for report to include mackerel?
And just a piece of housekeeping, the proposal was to, from Deputy McLaughlin, was to seek, related to the two reports, is it agreed by the committee that we take Michael's suggestion on board to include the third report to that? That's agreed?
Agreed.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Just to keep everything formal, shipshape, and everything. So, Deputy Whitmore.
Thank you. And I suppose I just want to go back, and it follows on from Deputy McLaughlin, but in relation to, because what you said earlier on, John, was that the Commissioner said that it would be possible to have a scheme funded through EU.
We asked previously if, when we met the Commissioner back at the end of January, we asked would it be possible for EMFAF funding to be used for crisis supports, and he says basically all it will take is for Ireland to ask, and that's possible. And we raised that at the Seafood Task Force, and we were told by an official that the Commissioner doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay, perfect. And so you didn't receive anything in writing from the Commissioner, that was
No.
just in a meeting?
Yeah,
so I suppose just to follow on from what we've agreed in relation to the Minister, I think it would be worthwhile if perhaps as we wrote as a committee to the Commissioner to ask to outline, you know, to say that this was raised as part of our discussions, because I think what's going to be really important is that we have that advice from the Minister so that we can say to the Department or the Minister, look, this is possible, we've received confirmation, and therefore can you work within that boundary. So I would just sort of add to
Because we have, from talking to other member states where they have fisheries where the vessels fish for 6 months and then they tie up for 6 months, receive payments, and it's on the grounds of it's to protect the stocks, etc. The reason behind that's how they get their payments.
Okay. And which countries do that, John?
I believe that's Portugal.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
to echo your points there about the Taoiseach. Like I think a dedicated Minister for the Marine really needs to be in around the Cabinet table. It's something I've been pushing for even since before I came here. I mean, with all this going on in the Marine, it's something that really needs to be done, and we need to have a voice at the table. Just a couple of quick things. The Commissioner, we talked about there, I met him on 2 or 3 occasions, and it seems to be when you chat to him that he says, no, these schemes is available, just apply. When you come back then, every door's closed in your face. Would that be what you're saying here?
They won't ask.
No.
We're told, oh, there's no point.
But why
ask the question and get the answer.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it seems like it seems to me that the inshore sector is too much bother.
Yeah.
You know.
But the couple of times I met him on different stuff, like he said, there's schemes there available. Try this and try that. When you come back here to Ireland, then there's no, that's not available. Who told you that? You know, there's a breakdown on what's going on here. There really is.
And I think from meeting with the Commissioner face to face last week, the stories he's been told about the situation in Ireland is a bit different to what our story is, because even for representation for the inshore sector, he said you have the regional advisory councils. We have our closest, the North West Waters Advisory Council, and he suggested that would be a good place, us NIFA as a producer organisation, to give a voice to the inshore sector. And the last subcommittee in the North West Waters Advisory Council that was dedicated to deal with the inshore sector, there's 6 producer organisations in Ireland as part of the North West Waters Advisory Council. The 4 producer organisations that actually got on that inshore sector committee was the 4 offshore POs. The 2 actual dedicated inshore producer organisations didn't get on it. So
this breakdown here, there really is. And just when you are talking, you talked about fish coming into the country. Like I talked to a couple of people that's important now, they have to, and it's not the weather they're worried about. Is what time the airplane's going to land in Dublin or Belfast till they get their product down the road. Like it's just criminal what's going on, what people has to import fish from other countries to take it in here because we can't catch our own. And just with Michael, sorry.
Just not hit and interrupt, but just on that point, it's not that we can't catch our own.
Yeah.
We landed €76 million worth of prawns, langoustines, Dublin Bay prawns last year in Ireland. I believe 74 million euros worth was exported. My own vessel, you know my boat in Killybegs. Crabs can leave my boat, and within 48 hours of leaving my boat can be in Hong Kong and China. We produce world-class seafood that goes all around the world. I made the comparison at a seafood conference, at a food conference a few months ago. What's going on in the seafood sector would be the same as Irish farmers exporting Irish beef to Brazil and importing exclusively Brazilian beef into Ireland, because that's what we're doing with the seafood in the country. We don't have a shortage of seafood in the country. We have the best seafood in the world. It's world class. It's wanted around the world. But what's been promoted and sold in the country isn't seafood, in my opinion.
And just, Michael, on a point you took up there earlier on about the bass, the tuna, and like you have the pollock too. Why is there something we can do through this committee to put pressure on the Minister and the department to reopen this? I mean, from what I hear, we didn't even apply for a tuna quota this year either again. And I mean, I know from the small inshore men that's up my way, I mean, if they had 1 or 2 tuna in the year, it would be great if they had 1 or 2 tags. It would help pay for the diesel. It would help pay for the crew. And, you know, the price of bait at the minute too is a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much, Deputy. And it's more than just the bluefin. I mean, if you look at it, there's no person under the age of 20 years old in Ireland has tasted a wild salmon. Like, I think that's criminal. But yet there's tens of thousands of seals eating them, no problem. Yeah. And you've got the bass stocks are just, you know, they're healthy, they're higher than they ever were, even when we were allowed to fish them. And they're eating all the smalls. If you open the stomach of a bass after a salmon run, you'll see their bellies full of baby salmon. And these fisheries, even if they're just pilot schemes, first of all, like the bluefin tuna, 100% agree with you, but we're already kind of underway with that. We're working with ICAT and trying to get a scientific fishery, but that has to be done through Europe. But it was the Irish government clause bass, it was the Irish government clause salmon. The EU never asked them to close it. Like, if there was a couple of pilot schemes opened where a few licenses were given to a few boats, first of all, just to see what is the story with the stocks, because the salmon do seem to be at sea, but yet the IFI don't seem to be getting them through the counters at the river for whatever reason that is. But bass is one fishery that could be reopened tomorrow morning, and it would take huge pressure off the shellfish stocks then. And like the Marine Institute will tell you that the stocks are at a sustainable level. The judge have asked for a 94% increase in the take-up of bass in European waters. And we're looking out our windows then at British and French pair trawlers fishing for them, and we can't ourselves. It's criminal what's actually happening, but yeah, bluefin as well, we didn't ask for. My understanding is the same, that we never asked. We didn't even send someone to the ICAT meeting, as far as I know, for bluefin this past year.
Thanks, mate.
Willie Maxwell.
Yeah, look, I have no question. It's just a proposal. I want to thank the National Inshore Fisheries for coming in and giving the document, and something we can work on. It's just something the Senator Boyle said about the EU, the commissioners. We have the minister, and is it something we could ask? Is it the next time the commissioner visits Ireland that we have him in here to this fisheries committee and put some of those questions? As Manus says, when anybody is out in Europe and you're told it's here, and then we come back. So I'd make that proposal that the next time the commissioner is in Ireland, that we would ask him to come into this committee. And if it's a day that this committee doesn't sit, that he says, well, I'm not there on a Tuesday, whatever day it is, we will arrange a committee meeting to suit the commissioner's diary. So make that proposal.
It's a very sensible proposal. Just to let you know, and we discussed this before the substantive part of the meeting, that the Commissioner will be in Ireland on the 7th and 8th of July to attend an event conference in Wexford, the EU Oceans Act, and we're already engaged with the Commissioner's office to see if it's possible that we would have some kind of engagement, be it here or be it in Wexford.
Well, I was going to add to my, if the Commissioner says he can't come to Dublin, it's in Wexford, we will go to Wexford to meet him.
Perfect.
I make that proposal.
And we'll send the correspondence that Deputy Whitmore has suggested as well. So we'll continue that engagement, because it is really important. And in my own experience, Deputy, I have found that often proposals, sensible, needed, necessary proposals, fall between two stools with a department. It could be any department, but a department in Dublin saying, well, we can't do that, the European Union won't let us, and the Commission saying, well, we don't know what the problem is because we've never been asked. And I think it is important that we look under the cover and see exactly who's saying what is permissible, what is not permissible, and what needs to change, so that we can have some level of support. Deputy Ward.
I'm just coming back to, we're looking at payments and stuff and going forward. I looked at a picture last night, and you'll be able to relate to this, John. Buttonport, 1989, it was dated, and there is 36 trawlers there in Buttonport. I was down last week, I was driving past, there's one, and you go past the small boats, very few. Then you go in home, well, my home in Armore Island. Myrn Kavanagh and her dad fishing out of Affert Pier, where my own father fished out of. That's it. It's basically what happens here is there's a culture with fishing communities, and that is eroding. Now, you, yourself, and Michael, if we didn't have you pushing forward on this and trying to sustain this, where would this be? Because you can see it is slowly dying, and we can't get the people moving in, as in the younger people coming up. I just want your opinion. I think that's very important to have that on record of the cultural impacts of what happens when you're not supported?
Yeah, thanks very much, Deputy. As John is closer to there, I'd leave him take the majority of the answer, but I just want to disagree with one thing you said. It's not slowly dying anymore, it's rapidly dying this past year. That's all I can say, but John would have be closer to your neck of the woods there.
Yeah, I suppose it's like the analogy I gave earlier. If you don't keep up the maintenance in your car, if you neglect it, eventually it's going to go bang. And the inshore sector has been neglected, totally and utterly neglected by past ministers, by the people, by the organisations that are supposed to be there to develop and help us. Like only going back to 2009, the Inshore Fisheries Strategy 2019 to 2023, when Michael asked Minister McConnell about it, he got a very narky answer as this, what's that got to do with me? He was in the brief after Minister Creed. There was a few in between them for a short time, but he was the next minister in line. It was his department's strategy that was given to BAM to implement, where nothing happened. COVID was the great excuse. We asked then, well, what's going to happen? We got to 2023. What's happening? We're going to redraft it and go again. As I said, we're in 2026, where BAM's looking at 2023 information. We'll be in 2027 by that time that comes out. We've had situations where quotas, access to polyvalent mackerel, we lost our access to that. Ministerial stroke of a pen gone. We had Northwest Herring, those would have been a big thing for Burton Port. It collapsed. The North Riff and NIFA made a request to Minister McConnell to redraft the policy behind that, because we feared when the fishery reopened, deja vu, the fishery would be fished the way it was before, and we are possibly looking at a collapse of that fishery again. 1,500 tonnes of it went uncaught last year. The fish were there in certain areas, the big boats couldn't get it, but the wee boats weren't allowed to catch it. But we could be, I seen something lately there, depending on, we could either, if we're 1 kilo under the line, the fishery's closed again 3 years after open, 1 kilo over, and we'll have a quota of 4,000 tonnes. But looking at the Marine Institute line, I made the comment that they're going to have to extend the page because it's only going down. So that's another fishery closed again, not by overfishing, by the inshore sector. If I could ask the committee to ask one question in relation to the bass. The bass was closed in Ireland for conservation measures, so when it got to, at some point, somebody said it has to be closed. Can you just ask where that line was at the time and where is the stocks now? Because if it fell below a certain level that it needed protection, that's fine, but where are we now in relation to that line? Because we've been told that the BA or the Marine Institute have the information, but it's not their remit to make recommendations to the department. They only act on requests from the department. So if the department don't ask, they can't say. Right. So I don't know if this committee can ask that of the Marine Institute.
Sure we can.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you both, and that's something definitely that we can engage with the Marine Institute on, and we can feed that back as well, so we can write to them. That brings to the end our questions and answers session and our meeting. As I said in my own comments, I'm personally deeply grateful for the work that you're doing, and this committee is grateful for your appearance here again to discuss the reality that's facing the inshore fishery sector and your proposal for some measures that would allow the industry to sustain itself for the next number of years and hopefully into the future. We've had a really good discussion, I think, and we have some actions that we as a committee are going to take, and we won't leave this alone either. Let me assure you of that. There's no further matters for discussion, so today's meeting of the Joint Committee stands adjourned until the 16th of June at 11 a.m. And just to remind members that the Select Committee will meet tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. and that meeting will be in public.
Thank you very much.